Namaste, hello, and welcome to India Global Week 2020, Be the Revival, India and a Better New World. I'm your host, Priyanka Deo, reporting from New Delhi, and I'm super excited because we have registered attendees from 52 countries. So this conference is truly in global interaction. Now, follow us on India Incorp, that's India INCORP, throughout India Global Week for updates, and I believe they have some fabulous content that's streaming. So with that, let's get started. Both the United States of America and India are home to the world's largest entrepreneurship and startup ecosystems. While successful startups create jobs and employment, can the US-India corridors boost employment further in India and the USA's economies to create positive impact? Let's find out. Let's explore this question further, and let's go directly to do so. It's called a conversation on enabling startups in the US-India corridor. If you're taking screenshots, pictures, if you want to post on social media, if you have any questions on for our guests or for our panelists, please use the hashtag #BeTheRevival. I'm tracking it online, so hopefully we can get to some of your questions during this session. The session is sponsored by India Inc. and presented by US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. The US-India Strategic Partnership Forum is a nonprofit organization with the primary objective of strengthening the US-India bilateral and strategic partnership. With that being said, let's dive right into our session. Without further ado, I now give it to the moderator of the session, Mr. Anil Advani, who's the managing partner of Inventus Law, to introduce our guests and begin the panel discussion. Anil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Priyanka, very much, and thanks for everyone for joining, including the panelists and also the host, India Inc. We have an exciting panel discussing really important issues and very relative and relevant issues. We only have 45 minutes, so I'm going to jump right into it. Make very quick introductions to the panelists. Again, they all are pretty famous, and there's a lot of information about them online. I'll be very brief about them. Praveen is the CEO and founder of Teammate, a venture fund and foundry in the Bay Area, and helping also Israeli, sort of making the Israeli-US connection. So he has another global perspective to add. He's a former managing partner of Americas and Asia for the Software Intelligence Fund. We've all heard about that, and I'd love to learn more about his experiences there. Bipul is the founder CEO of Rubrik, another Silicon Valley-based very successful startup company. He's also a venture partner at Lightspeed Venture Capital. Umesh, a friend of mine, and he's the CEO, founder of Uniphore, and again, another successful startup in Silicon Valley. He's also my partner in crime at USISPF Startup Connect. And our goal is to connect again, US and India ecosystems, bring founders from India and help them facilitate their transition into becoming global companies with US connection. So without much further ado, I'm going to go right into the panel. As you see, we have amazing speakers and a lot of content to cover. With that, I would hope to the panelists with a simple question. Where do you see, what is the state of play for the US-India technology corridor? Because that's what sort of our world is revolving around. What are your observations on the current and future of in the US-India technology corridor? And each of you can just share your thoughts to start off.
I can start, if you can hear me. What I see with India-US corridor is, if you look at the last, call it like 25, 30 years of Indian knowledge worker space, Indian IT expertise, it has been a lot of automation of business processes for large US companies. And as productivity-led digitization of the businesses are happening in America, the Indian software ecosystem really can produce many very large companies that are like automating and digitizing manual workflows across the landscape in America. And if you look at Umesh and what he's doing in his company, he's again digitizing and bringing AI into a very important space, which is thoroughly manual today. So you'll see a lot of like that expertise, enterprise business process expertise coming into the US, whether it's delivered as a SaaS applications, completely automated AI applications, but digitization is going to be the major force in both ways.
Sure. Praveen, Umesh.
I'll go next. Adding on Bipul's point, I totally agree with Bipul on what's happening today. But the way I look at it is in the last 3 decades, we've probably gone through three very important phases, and we are kind of entering phase four. Phase one was when Indian software produced extremely large and successful IT services companies, Tata Consultancy, Infosys, and others, which became service providers to the globe, candidly. And these were multi-billion-dollar companies. The second phase of Indian technology in the US-India technology corridor was when large US companies like Cisco started using India as a product hub, right? Moving their engineering second headquarters and setting up product hubs in India for product development for the globe. The third phase started to see companies, the ones that Bipul is talking about, like my company, Uniphore, where entrepreneurs took the leap of starting to create products in India for the world from ground up, right? Freshworks is a great example. Uniphore is a good example. MindTickle is another example. And in the new phase, in the new world, I bet that we're going to see an acceleration of Indian B2B product SaaS in the US-India technology corridor. Both US and India are already pretty large B2C markets for their own product companies, but B2B SaaS is one that's driving an accelerated collaboration in the US-India technology corridor.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I think clearly India's traditional strength in terms of understanding global business has been a foundation for this wave of startups that we're seeing out of India that have been tremendously successful, as Umesh and Bipul just pointed out. So I think one of the other interesting things we're seeing is the notion of innovation is spreading beyond just the B2B space. So, there's a company called Quizzes, for example, which is used today by pretty much all the K through 12 school teachers in the United States. It's an Indian startup. It's basically a freemium product today where it is used by teachers to deliver lessons and testing for their students as an assisted tool. So I think you're seeing a lot more sort of convergence, if you will, of the application of technology to problems that are not just unique to India and beyond the B2B space in areas such as education, ed tech, as well as health tech. And I think the true dynamism of the US-India corridor, I think, is yet to be seen, and we have some exciting new things ahead of us.
Thank you for
Did we lose Anil?
Yeah, we might have a
Possibly.
bandwidth problem.
Yes. This is the new world that we live in.
Yeah.
So while Anil,
Maybe you can just kind of talk a little bit about sort of your experience kind of moving from India to US as we wait for Anil.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. Look, my journey as an entrepreneur, I founded Uniphore in the year 2008, and this was an example of a true university R&D incubation. We started tinkering with speech recognition technology inside the labs of IIT Madras, right? And as we found success in the technology development, we decided to commercialize it, starting with India first, and beginning to go global, but sticking to Asia. Today, we are a global company headquartered in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. We eventually found business opportunity in the US. Like most B2B SaaS entrepreneurs, we found that North America was the single largest TAM of the global TAM available to us. And that just compelled us to look at this market very seriously, look at it with probably a different strategy than any other market in the world, which then also meant that I, as the CEO, along with the board, decided that I will relocate lock, stock, barrel with my family 2.5 years ago here in the US. Today, about 60% of our business is North America, 40% is rest of the world in a very short period of time. And that probably would hold or get even more skewed as we scale up in the coming years. The experiences broadly have been, First, it used to be said that if you have a good product market fit done in India, you have to redo it in the US. But the wave that both you and Bipul have spoken about, the new SaaS startups from the beginning are building products for the US and global product market fits, right? So that cycle is shortening. Of course, cultural fit is very important. So I had to rebuild my entire leadership team. 6 out of 8 of my C-level execs are with me in the Silicon Valley office. We found that to be successful here in the US, we had to become a true US company to be successful here. So we kind of think global but act local in every country. So we have a strong local leader even outside of the US, but the global strategies are formed here. And we've obviously found that the US enterprise opportunity is just prolific. There's a ton of opportunity for differentiated good AI products or any other field for that matter. There's a reason why this is a very deep enterprise market.
It's very interesting because.
Now we lost Praveen.
Go ahead, Anil.
Sorry, I'm back. I don't know what happened, but yes. So I was saying I missed some part of it, Umesh, but I understand what sort of the theme of it, and we all obviously are in agreement, which is why we are here. We actually in our small firm, we represent hundreds and hundreds of startup founders, technology companies looking to come over to the US. And I'm sure each of you is also talking to founders that are introduced and looking to make the move. What is the sort of, let's say, the top 3 things you would advise founders to do while they're in India? Let's say they build the product, they have tested it out, they have some customers. What are the top 3 things that they can do while they're sitting in India to prepare for both mentally, physically, emotionally? I say that most of the founders that don't make the move early on are basically because of laziness. They have to do the laundry, all of the personal stuff. So what are the top 3 things that from your experience, Umesh, you can share in terms of what you could have done better to prepare for this transition over?
So Anil, the cool thing about doing a panel with 3 good friends is we tend to agree on everything. So I'll try to dissent a little bit with you just to make this interesting. It took me 8 years in my startup for personally to make the move. And while I agree with you, I'm generally a lazy person in my life, tend to be very thoughtful before making big decisions. But this was one very deliberate. And I suspect most founders find themselves in this situation. I was fortunate to have John Chambers, former CEO of Cisco, as an investor board member before I made this move. And one of the things that I learned from him and in conversations with many others was that while US offers the biggest market opportunity for all of us in the B2B SaaS world, especially Indian entrepreneurs building product companies, but it is also the most competitive, right? This is the land of innovation. This is the Silicon Valley and Boston and New York. The world's best technologies and products are created here, especially companies in the US who understand the local market far more than anyone else coming from the outside. And so for us, it was important that we had a combination of 3 things. One, we said it's not enough to have a good product. It's very important to have a dramatically better product, at least in some categories, so that as we go into a new market where we are an unknown, untested brand initially, our product helps us win the market and the initial customers, right? So it is very important to have that sort of checklist. The second, we said, this is also going to be a market where we need to be prepared to invest a lot of capital fairly quickly to establish ourselves, establish the brand, win the first few customers. So to have enough sort of fuel in the tank. Now, the definition of what's enough capital, enough fuel in the tank to make this transition is different for each company. But we sort of said that not until we had raised our Series B round, we didn't feel we had that capability. While running the business in rest of the world, which was humming along, and be ready to invest in the US, we needed enough capital. And the third, in my case, which Bipul would agree with me, having a mentor, in our case, a board member like John Chambers, became a great sort of safety net for the CEO of a running company to move here It's a great support system that the Silicon Valley particularly offers. And so step 3 on the checklist for me would be find a mentor or an ecosystem to get associated with, where immediate support of what to do, what not to do, the playbook. Especially think about an entrepreneur's life. It's not just the business moving. What visa do you come on? How do you set up your subsidiary in the US? How do you start hiring the first people? How do you go about selling the first few customers? Are there networks that can help you do that, right? So having a support system, either in an individual or an organization, is important. So to summarize quickly, having enough capital, making sure in some product category there's a dramatic differentiation on the product, and then an ecosystem support are sort of the 3 things, and then overcome the personal laziness for sure.
So thanks, Umesh. That's very helpful. And so I guess you're saying when you're building the product, while you're sitting in India, start thinking about the product for the US and global markets, right? Start building ground up for the global markets with that vision in mind. Yes. That's great. Bipul, do you have any other, you've also made the transition. So do you have any other suggestions? And feel free to disagree with Umesh. And obviously not everyone can afford to have John Chambers as the initial sort of advisor angel. So for the founders who you are mentoring, what are the other suggestions, thoughts, inputs you can provide for the transition, facilitating the smooth transition?
In our case, we were in the US and we started the company in the US. We didn't do the India to US transition, but
so you know how to do your laundry already.
Yeah, I mean, getting used to all kinds of things before starting the company. But the model that I look at, and I was a venture capitalist in my previous life and did a lot of Israel investment in late 2000s. The model in Israel is a good template for Indian entrepreneurs, because if you look at the companies starting in Israel, what they do is they sell to some local businesses, but they aim at the US as the core market. And in terms of their thinking of product market fit, they're thinking about go-to-market strategy, they're thinking about sales and marketing strategies in terms of like how are they going to hire people, which are within the US there are different markets, which markets are early adopter markets, what's a late adopter market. So they actually walk through the ecosystem to create a template, and then they execute with the founder CEO moving to the US and then creating the organizational pull. I mean, one thing that is interesting in B2B space is the cultural framework doesn't apply to the technology and the business process that you're trying to simplify. So the product, if you have a real product, this product is globally applicable with very little change. So if you have the right thinking in terms of go-to-market strategy in the US, and if you orient yourself truly from the early days that I'm going to take this product to global market, and particularly the US market. So you need to kind of think through sales and marketing, and you need some bit of an ecosystem, just like Umesh found in Mr. Chambers, who is obviously guru for all kinds of startups and go-to-market strategy. So you need to have that ecosystem with you, but the mentality has to be built wherever it is built, but sell in the global market.
Let me ask a follow-up question, then I'll have Praveen chime in as well with his thoughts. But so product understood, right? You're sitting in India, you sort of start thinking about building the product, and it's sort of, it's pretty generic in terms of, building the engineering. But what about the sales cycles, right? I mean, I've heard founders talk about how, and Umesh touched upon it, it's very competitive. But have you perceived that because not being part of an old, boys club in the US, selling to enterprise, the way old school sort of, shake hands, golf club buddies, has that affected your business or your ability to scale? Do you see that as a challenge for Indian founders coming in? Umesh, your thoughts as well on the same issue?
I mean, from my perspective, what is happening is that the CIO's world has completely transformed in the last 10 years, call it 15 years. They used to be the owner and manager of the infrastructure and applications. They are now becoming consumer of services, and their number one job is portfolio management and risk management. And every company around the world is exposed to competition and disruption. So now, unlike 10 years ago, where the business was mostly done on relationship and comfort, now the business is done on moving the agenda, digitization agenda forward. So if you have a value proposition that is actually makes a difference, whether it's in cost, is in their risk reduction, is in their top line and competitive posture, and just overall innovation. There's a lot more eagerness and a lot more risk. Like people are more amenable to risk and adopting new technology, and this is actually a golden era for any startups, whether they are starting in India or starting in the US, to get into enterprise and make a huge difference.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one of the things that's important to understand is what B2B software has fundamentally transformed, right? So today, a lot of the go-to-market models are quite different, even from the time that I was a CEO at Viptela and at VCE. And one of the amazing things is that today, most of these software models are consumption-based. Consumers essentially are able to consume the software from wherever they are, right? So infrastructure is also normalized because you have AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, which are globally available. You could be in India essentially developing software for your customers. And as long as, the points that Umesh and Bipul made, which is you understand your customers, your ability to actually deliver the product to your customers and for them to be able to go and access it and consume it has fundamentally transformed. You're not, so you don't actually need the traditional sales machines anymore for a lot of the companies. You take a company like Postman, right? That is another example of a company that moved from India to the US and just had a very successful round. They are an API driven company. They're building a community, right? And for them, that community is global. So you have customers in the US, you have customers, in Israel, in Europe, all over the world, essentially using Postman as sort of their API hub in order for them to be able to build their software. So you have a category of products, in the software as a service platform where the go-to-market models are very dynamic. And so the old school way of selling enterprise software, you still need sort of the representatives to go out and establish the connections, but a significant amount of your go-to-market can be driven purely, from the cloud on a self-serve basis and based on community. So I think, the approach to how you build a go-to-market has evolved, and I think that's to the benefit of companies, such as Umesh's and others that are coming out of India.
Thank you, Praveen. And I want to continue with sort of dialogue with you in case we lose you. Again, must be a Saratoga thing. So you also have a very unique perspective, having been a investor at SoftBank Vision Fund for Americas and Asia. You've seen entrepreneurs across the world, literally, and we try to be as blunt and forthright as you can be. How would you rank Indian entrepreneurs versus, I would say, US or even others in Asia, China, Singapore, other parts of Asia? How would you rank them, and what is the advice you would say that here are the things that you lack and here are the things you do really well, do more of that, and this is what these are the things that you can actually develop to compete with, the global sort of founders and companies that you're competing with?
Sure. So Umesh, here's your report card. No, kidding aside, I don't find Indian entrepreneurs any different or any lesser than an entrepreneur over here in the US, right? So at SoftBank, we had a unique platform. We had the opportunity to work with entrepreneurs across the globe, including, in China, in India, here, Europe, Israel, and such like. And I think, entrepreneurs are always fundamentally driven by that core, desire to be able to kind of create something amazing for their customers. So they have an exceptional understanding of the customers and a very clear vision, which I find Indian entrepreneurs have as well. I think if there are areas where they need to continue to kind of focus on is really sort of that developing a very deep understanding of the way things are evolving. Bipul said this is a golden age for startups. One of the reasons why it is a golden age is because there's tremendous amount of disruption. Technology waves right now, transformations come in much shorter cycles. So the key for you as an entrepreneur, as a founder, is to be able to sort of be at that cutting edge. And the internet and all the technology we talked about allows us to do it. But so the most important thing I think is what we enjoy in the Silicon Valley here is the ability to kind of step out the door and talk to a Bipul Sinha, right? Who's a founder of a successful startup, who's invested in companies, who's an encyclopedia of how you build a great company. So if you're a startup founder, you just go approach him and he's open to be able to help you. I think you're building that community as well in India. And I think the more you see success, the more Umesh's, the more, Girish's from Freshworks or the Abhinavs from Postman become successful. I think you start to build that community of mentors and the body of experience that allows you to navigate that tricky initial phase of how do you sort of, get to that, product market fit, get to scale, get to understanding of those customers. So I think India as an ecosystem is probably behind Silicon Valley from a maturity perspective, but by no means are the founders any less ambitious or any less capable. And I think that's the really promising thing. The other thing I'll say also is India is unique. So we're talking about B2B startups, but you think about startups, right? It is a incredibly dynamic marketplace. This whole, the Indian notion of jugaad, right? Is that you can see that in the way a lot of these B2C companies approach the market. And that's tremendous. That's innovation at a very grassroots level. So you have startups not just in our traditional space of health tech and B2B and such like. You have
we lost.
Umesh, while we wait for Praveen to come back, how would you rate yourself as an entrepreneur coming in, and especially now that you work with other entrepreneurs around you? Bipul is a US entrepreneur, you are the one transitioning over. Would you be candid enough to share your thoughts?
So Anil, the title I'll give myself is EIL. I'm an entrepreneur in learning. Like Praveen said, one of the biggest excitement for me to come to Silicon Valley was to spend time with people like Bipul. And Praveen is absolutely right. So there's a ton of opportunity for entrepreneurs like me to come here and learn from people who've been there, done that in their second, third, fourth startups, or big company veterans. But to the point of ecosystems, there are a lot of ecosystems which are becoming active in India. There's a movement in India for SaaS founders that some of us have sort of put in place. It's called SaaS Bhumi, which roughly translates to the land of SaaS. And it's fundamentally by entrepreneur for entrepreneur, people like Girish, Vinod from former CloudCherry, who's now with Cisco, and many other SaaS founders who are sort of crossed the chasm, Series C, D, E, have come together and become a playbook and a resource tool for very early stage SaaS startups. So this year, when we did an event inviting early stage SaaS startups to come and interact with some of the sort of late stage and growth stage companies, at the beginning of the year, we had 10,000 applicants who wanted to attend the event, right? So that shows you the scale of activity is just accelerating. Of those, despite whatever filters you apply, you have to assume that at least 1,000 or more of these early stage companies would find it compelling to have North America as their most important market, right? And so for them to come here in the US, the kind of ecosystems, Anil, that you and I are part of in US ISPF, we've created a Startup Connect program with very similar objectives that some of the successful startups from India who migrated, CEOs like me have gone through the journey. Some of the playbooks when I came were not written, right? If you think about Jaspreet from Dhruva, Girish from Freshworks, when I came, but a lot of those playbooks are now the templates, right? People don't need to reinvent the wheel in some of the hygiene of how do you migrate the business or grow the business or CEO moves, and what are the first few playbooks to write. So the US Startup Connect ecosystem that we're creating here in the US is ready to sort of receive those entrepreneurs who are ready to migrate out of the SaaS Bhumi ecosystem in India, ready to scale beyond CDE rounds and scale up in the US, right? I would also say from a go-to-market perspective, India has, for the last couple of years, developed one very unique set of tools, capabilities, and people skills, which I bet is still unique in the world. And companies like Freshworks are a great example of this. If you look at SMB SaaS, and Uniphore is not into SMB SaaS. We are the traditional enterprise SaaS, right? But if you look at SMB SaaS, the go-to-market for that cannot be the winer, diner, golfer type sales executive. It has to be digital. It has to be online. It has to be marketing led and converted online. Credit card on file, renewal every month, that type of a business. With cost structures that India has, and now with the talent pool that some of these unicorns, early B2B unicorns have created in terms of global GTM machines, India is fast becoming the global SMB SaaS hub, and that's unbeatable. You can't do SMB SaaS GTM as effectively even from US, even for US SMBs, just because of cost structures, right? So if you can crack the code of doing that from India, which a lot of startups are doing, it's becoming a new breed of opportunities and companies that India is creating.
Thanks, Umesh. That was a great summary and sort of overview of where we are. And we can talk about this topic all day, right? And we still have a lot of things to sort of still finish. So let's shift the focus, because we are talking about US and India. So Praveen, maybe I'll shift gears to you and segue into what Umesh was saying. As an investor, and Bipul, please chime in. As an investor, and this is not just for US, but folks who may be tuning in from Australia, UK, Singapore, rest of the world, what are the opportunities you would look at in India now as a market? What are the opportunities you would advise people to? Where should they look? How should they go about looking at India as a market and opportunities for selling the products and also investments?
Yeah, looks like my Teams has a timeout on my on my speech, so I keep getting cut off at a certain point. So I apologize for that.
I have a button with me, so hurry up.
So I think, look, there. One of the things that's amazing is for all the reasons that Umesh and Bipul just pointed out, there's tremendous amount of investor interest in India. In fact, I think just this week, Sequoia just closed another $1.3 billion India-focused fund. The interesting thing about that, by the way, is that 500 million is for early stage and 800 million is for growth stage, right? Which is very unique in the sense that they now are looking at investing in startups in the later stages as well. Whereas in the past, the India ecosystem was primarily focused on seed and early stage investing, right? And you've had players like SoftBank, Tiger Global, Nexus Ventures, a bunch of really seasoned investors in India for a long, long time. So I think the opportunity I would divide into three buckets. The first bucket is B2B, and I think both Umesh and Bipul have articulated really well the opportunity, the ecosystem, the strengths of the market itself. The second is a B2C, which is where most of the unicorns today in India are, right? The Olas and the Swiggies and such like. And I think a big part of that is because India in itself is a massive market with its own unique sort of problems to be solved. And there's a lot of innovative ideas to go solve them. And today there's that baseline of technology or talent to be able to go and solve these. So I think you're going to see a lot of exciting opportunities in India. The unit economics is the most important thing. I think the first generation of B2C startups, if you really think about it, have been tremendously successful, as some of them have struggled with unit economics. So when I, as an investor, look at the B2C market, I'm looking for that maturity in terms of approaching the opportunity, but also approaching the opportunity with real focus on the economics of the business model itself. The third, I think, really interesting ones. I think there's a huge underserved set of opportunities. If you take a look at India today, it's the pharmacy of the world, right? We have tremendous amount of skill set in terms of biotech and pharmaceutical capabilities. At the same time, the actual sort of healthcare system in India it has a long ways to go in terms of being able to service and address the people of India. So there's a lot of government initiatives. There's something called the Health Stack, which the government has published, which essentially creates a set of open APIs and frameworks to be able to access a lot of the data that is required to build these companies. So I'm really excited to see how some of these newer areas around health tech in particular, because I think health tech is another sector that can be built in India for the world, right? As well as edutech, because a lot of what India is good at in terms of STEM and English, language capability and such like can be transportable to the rest of the world. So these are other areas which are outside of the traditional B2C, B2B, which I think are very exciting areas of investment.
Great. A friend of mine, actually, Shakir, runs Omnivation, and what they do is they look at Israeli companies that have good products and tech, and open up the Indian markets for them. So do you see any sort of opportunities for groups like or entrepreneurs doing that, looking at technology that's really built for US and global markets, and sort of then tailoring that to the Indian markets? I mean, are there opportunities for folks here to be looking at something like that?
Sure. I think, again, India is a large, sophisticated market in and of itself. I think for startups here, we've always, India has always been a key part of the overall sort of global go-to-market, right? I mean, when we were at Cisco, we had a pretty significant India office, not just from the perspective of engineering talent, but also as a market in and of itself. I think the most sophisticated India is becoming in terms of consumer adoption of newer technologies. In the telco space, for example, there's massive amount of opportunity. So if you're looking at edge computing or 5G, right, or security, right, all of these areas are fundamental to India's infrastructure, which is rapidly digitizing, but presents tremendous amount of opportunities for companies here to be able to go address. I think the B2C is an area which is obviously very unique to India. So I think the Indian startups will have a leg up there, but for a lot of the B2B companies, particularly in the infrastructure space, I think India is a huge market. And more so now, I think with all the changes that are happening in terms of the investments into infrastructure that the government is making, cybersecurity, telco infrastructure, communication infrastructure, I think is a fundamental area of investment and a massive opportunity given the scale of India.
Great. Thank you, Praveen, for your thoughts. We are running around, close to the end of our time, and I have a very hot topic, an important topic that I want to bring in with the limited time we have. So try and restrain your political viewpoints on this. But for the bureaucrats, and I believe there's some union ministers and really powerful people, decision makers who might be listening in, what are the challenges? And let's break it down into Indian entrepreneurs that are looking to get global, and from a US perspective, obviously immigration is a hot topic, so let's just take our political viewpoint. What are the challenges that entrepreneurs face that that bureaucrats and policymakers can sort of hear from you and sort of make changes to facilitate that transfer? Umesh, I know you have some personal thoughts also, so I'll open it up for everybody.
I'm happy to go first with my first-hand experience. I'll spend 60 seconds first on just quantifying the opportunity economically and broader to societies with the US-India tech corridor before I come to why it's important to address some of the challenges, right? It is not just, we've spent the last sort of 30 minutes talking about how is it great for entrepreneurs, finding markets, technology companies, but just for societies and economies, this US-India tech corridor, especially the startup corridor, is very important. In the US-India US ISPF Startup Connect program, we polled just eight B2B SaaS companies who are initial members, and we found that these companies have created about 6,000 jobs globally, out of which 640 are in the US, right? We found that for each entrepreneur who came from India on a visa, for each visa granted to the entrepreneur, there were 40 jobs created here in the US. And the median salary for these jobs was about $175,000, which is 3 times the national average. So fundamentally, this is a story about dramatic job creation and economic activity by successful startups moving between the two countries. We also found that it is not a zero-sum game, right? So for every job that this startup had created in the US, there were 8 jobs that the startup had created back in India, right? So it is a total win-win-win overall from the US standpoint, from the Indian standpoint, and obviously creating value for the shareholders and employees and everything else, right? So the way I think about it is, imagine this number not being 8 companies, but 1,000 companies in the next 24 months, which is totally a dream that we can all think of achieving. There is just talent waiting to build products and sell it globally, and US being a natural market. So the amount of job creation and economic activity that can be had with this is tremendous. Now, coming to what is possibly slowing this down, which can accelerate this, right? So I break it down into two fronts. One on the US administrative side the US side has still not issued clarity on immigration and visa, let's say for job creators, right? I'm going to steer clear from the debate about H-1Bs and others, but fundamentally the category that we're talking about are entrepreneurs who create jobs both in US side and India, and there ought to be a much easier and almost an accelerated way of inviting such entrepreneurs because they add to the local economies, right? On the India side, there are a ton of things that make Indian companies less competitive than, say, their Chinese counterparts or Asian counterparts. Indian startups still don't have a regulatory regime where they can list in markets like NASDAQ and NYSE if they find US as their largest market. The regulation still doesn't allow them direct listing from India. If you're building a B2B SaaS company, the one that we're talking about, something as small as, it might seem very trivial, but it is structural, that you still don't have a regulatory framework for getting credit card on file from your customer who wants to renew month on month, right? You still, every month has to be a process of sending a one-time password to their phones, etc., right? So think about the ecosystem you're creating, and that is pushing entrepreneurs to register their companies in Delaware from get-go. Whether or not they have business in the US on day one or not, entrepreneurs are now getting savvy and saying, when I become big, I want to list in the say NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange, and I want to be a SaaS company with some of these payment mechanisms. So I'm better off starting out as a US registered company. So I think clearing off some regulatory challenges on the India side and fundamentally making immigration easier for entrepreneurs and, say, the initial leadership teams of these companies on the US side, because it's a tremendous economic and job opportunity.
Thank you. We have 1 minute left, so please, closing thoughts on that issue, the challenges. Bipul, Praveen?
I mean, from my perspective, one of the big opportunities in India-US corridor is India has a very large population, but not enough AI model and AI research and AI funding. America has a smaller population, but significant investment in AI model, AI research. If we, through some regulatory framework, provide this access and transfer of data across the two worlds, we can like usher in a next level of technical value creation and really create significant inroads into from cancer research to many areas of B2B and digitization we talked about. So tremendous opportunity to be had.
Yeah, the last point I'll add, I think Umesh was really articulate in terms of the specifics, having lived it. The world as we go forward is going to be a distributed world, right? In the sense that most companies are going to be distributed. Today, most, with the advent of cloud, you don't really care where your workloads are running. I think similarly, you're going to have a lot of connectivity between US and India in terms of talent, in terms of businesses, in terms of go-to-market, in terms of capabilities. And I think from a regulatory perspective, even from a student, what's going on right now in terms of the H-1B visas and such like, the F-1 visas. I came here as a student and have been able to contribute to the economy. I think these connections are extremely important that need to be nurtured by both governments, because I think the future is not a US company or India company. I think it's going to be a hybrid because the markets are so intertwined, and the talent flow between these two countries is going to be foundational to, I think, the next generation of these great companies we're going to see.
I want to close with thanking all of you. I can't imagine, right? We could have covered so much. We have, in the 45 minutes we've covered the whole landscape of what's happened in the last 10 years and also sort of the future. And Umesh, you'll love me for saying this. This is our theme at USISPF. The US-India is really the defining relationship of our generation. So I think with that, and obviously hope for the future, I want to thank all of you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.